Right now, you may still be looking at your reality and wondering when it will change. But what if I told you it already has? Not in the outer world yet, but in the only place that truly matters, within consciousness. Because everything you will ever experience is born first in your awareness, and only later reflected in your world. Your specific person is not a mystery. They are not confused. They are not lost. They are simply expressing the strongest assumption that has been impressed upon them. And that assumption is you. The moment you changed your inner state, you changed their direction. The moment you decided, even silently, I am chosen, the entire unseen movement began reorganizing itself around that truth. You do not chase love. You occupy the state of being chosen. And from that state, everything must respond. Stop waiting for signs. Stop analyzing distance. Stop measuring absence. Because what you are looking for is already formed in the invisible, fully complete, fully alive, fully aligned. There is a version of you that already has them choosing you every single time. That version does not hope. That version does not question. That version simply knows. And here is the secret. You don't get it by trying, you get it by being. When you fall asleep, do not imagine separation. Imagine fulfillment. Feel the ease of being the one they always return to. Let it be natural. Let it be certain. Let it feel done. Because creation does not respond to effort. It responds to assumption. And the assumption is simple. You are the one they choose. Always. Automatically, without resistance. This is not something you are waiting for. This is something you are remembering. And once you accept it fully, the outer world has no choice but to follow. It is done. This is not a poetic idea, but a lived principle of consciousness. Everything you experience externally is shaped, filtered, and organized by the assumptions you consistently hold within. What you believe to be true about yourself, others, and life becomes the silent architect of your experiences, not because the outer world is independently deciding things about you, but because your inner state is constantly projecting meaning onto everything you encounter. Assumptions are not just thoughts you occasionally think. They are the deep, repeated, emotionally charged beliefs that settle into identity. And identity is the foundation from which perception flows. Two people can live in the same situation and experience entirely different realities, simply because their assumptions about that situation are different. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. One sees delay, the other sees preparation. The event is the same, but the meaning is different, and meaning is what creates experience. When you assume something to be true, your mind begins to collect evidence that supports it, not because the world is changing instantly, but because your attention is being guided by your inner expectation. You begin to notice what matches your belief and ignore what contradicts it. Slowly, your outer world appears to confirm what was already accepted within. In truth, it is not confirmation, it is reflection. This is why the inner state is so powerful. If you assume lack, you will interpret events through lack. If you assume love, you will begin to perceive love even in small gestures. If you assume separation, distance will feel reinforced. If you assume connection, even silence will feel meaningful rather than empty. Reality does not argue with your assumption, it follows it. But there is something even deeper here. Assumptions are not fixed. They can be changed. And when they change, perception changes. And when perception changes, experience follows. This is why inner work is not about forcing outcomes, but about gently shifting identity. You do not chase reality. Embody a new version of yourself, and reality reorganizes around that embodiment. To assume consciously is to live as though the desired outcome is already true, not as fantasy, not as escape, but as inner certainty. It is the calm knowing that does not need external proof to exist. And from that place of knowing, your actions, reactions, and energy naturally align with the new state. So when you hear that your reality is always responding to your inner assumptions, understand it fully. It means nothing outside of you is random. Nothing is separate from your inner position. Everything is responding not to your wishes, but to your state of being. And once you truly accept this, something powerful happens. You stop pleading with life. You stop waiting for permission. You stop reacting from fear. Instead, you begin to choose your inner state deliberately. knowing that the outer world has no choice but to mirror it in time because reality is not happening to you. It is happening from you. And the moment you realize that, you also realize this. You have always been the cause, not the effect. This truth reveals something far deeper than surface level attraction or emotional attachment. It points directly to the unseen mechanism through which experience is formed, not through the independent actions of another person, but through the meaning you consistently assign to them within your own consciousness. What you call their behavior is often just the reflection of your internal expectations playing out in time. When you hold a belief about someone, you are not simply observing them. You are interacting with them through a mental and emotional lens that filters everything. If your belief is rooted in love, connection, and certainty, then even their silence feels warm. Even their distance feels temporary. Even their unpredictability feels aligned with eventual closeness. But if your belief is rooted in fear, doubt, or rejection, then even their kindness can be questioned. Even their presence can feel unstable. Even their words can be misread. Resistance, as you perceive it, is often not an external force opposing you. It is your interpretation of uncertainty. You see delay and call it rejection. You see space and call it absence. You see neutrality and call it disinterest. But in truth, these are not fixed meanings. They are assigned meanings, and meaning always originates within you. This is why belief holds authority over experience. Belief is not passive thought, it is an active creative force shaping perception. The person you are thinking about is not outside the influence of your inner state. They are being experienced through it. Your attention selects them, your assumption defines them, and your emotional tone colors them. In many ways, you are not waiting for them to change. You are waiting for your perception of them to align with a new belief. Because once belief shifts, the entire experience of the person shifts with it. Their actions may remain the same for a moment, but their meaning to you transforms instantly. This is where inner mastery begins. Instead of wrestling with what appears to be resistance, you begin to question the belief generating that interpretation. You stop asking, why are they like this? And start observing, what am I assuming about them right now? That shift alone begins to dissolve emotional conflict because you are no longer reacting to them. You are adjusting the lens through which they are seen. Over time, consistent belief does something remarkable. It organizes experience to match itself, not because the other person is being controlled, but because your awareness is being directed differently. You notice new possibilities, you respond differently, you interpret differently. And in that subtle shift, the entire dynamic begins to transform. So when it is said that the person you think about is shaped by your belief, not their resistance, it is pointing you back to your creative center. It is reminding you that the story is not being written by their reluctance, but by your assumption of what they are. And once that is fully understood, you are no longer at the mercy of appearances. You are no longer decoding signals for meaning. You are choosing meaning itself because in the end, no one is fixed in your experience. They are fluid, formed moment by moment through the belief you hold about them. And when belief becomes steady, perception becomes stable. And when perception becomes stable, experience follows without effort. You are not responding to them. You are revealing them through belief. And that realization quietly changes everything. This is because feeling is not a passive reaction. It is the creative power behind every experience you encounter. Thought alone is like a blueprint, but feeling is the energy that brings that blueprint to life. Without feeling, desire remains distant, abstract, and incomplete. But when feeling enters, imagination becomes experience in motion. Every event you have ever lived through first passed through feeling before it became reality. You did not simply think your way into your current life, you felt your way into it. Whether consciously or unconsciously, your dominant emotional states shape the direction of your experiences. Feeling is what gives thought weight, substance, and creative force. When you feel something deeply, your entire inner world aligns with it. Your attention shifts, your interpretations change, and your actions begin to reflect that state. This is why feeling cannot be separated from creation. It is the bridge between inner assumption and outer expression. If you feel lack, life will appear to confirm lack. If you feel love, love begins to reveal itself in unexpected places. If you feel certainty, even uncertainty outside you begins to lose its power. The outer world is not responding to your words alone, it is responding to your emotional state. Feeling is also what makes imagination real to the subconscious mind. The subconscious does not distinguish between what is physically present and what is vividly felt. It accepts feeling as instruction. When a feeling is repeated consistently, it becomes familiar. And what is familiar becomes natural. And what comes natural becomes reality. This is why change does not come through force or struggle, but through a shift in inner feeling. You do not need to fight your current circumstances. You need to inhabit a new emotional state that already contains the outcome you desire. When that feeling becomes stable within you, the outer world begins to reorganize itself accordingly. But most people struggle here because they try to feel something while still identifying with the opposite. They attempt to feel abundance while mentally anchored in lack. They try to feel love while emotionally rehearsing separation. This creates inner conflict, and conflict weakens creative power. True transformation happens when feeling becomes natural, not forced. When you no longer try to feel something, but instead gently accept it as true within yourself. That is when the feeling becomes stable enough to influence experience. Feeling is not just emotion, it is identity in motion. It tells the mind who you are being right now, and who you are being right now determines what you perceive, what you attract, and what you allow. So when it is said that feeling is the secret that sets everything in motion, it is pointing to the deepest truth of creation. You are not waiting for life to change so you can feel different. You are feeling differently so life can change. And once this is understood, everything shifts. You stop chasing outcomes and start embodying states. You stop reacting to appearances and start generating inner experiences that naturally unfold outward. Because feeling is not just part of creation, it is the engine of creation itself. And whatever you consistently feel, you are already becoming. This is not a suggestion or a philosophical idea. It is the natural unfolding of consciousness into form. Assumption is not casual thinking, it is a settled inner acceptance, a quiet agreement within yourself about how life is, how others behave, and who you are in relation to everything. Once that inner agreement is formed and maintained, it begins to shape the way you interpret, respond to, and move through the world. Experience is not separate from assumption. It is assumption made visible over time. When you assume something to be true, you are not simply predicting the future. You are selecting a state of being. And that state carries with it perception, attention, emotional tone, and behavior. These elements work together to gradually externalize what was first held internally. The world you see is not random. It is structured by the assumptions you consistently live from. For example, if you assume you are not chosen, life will repeatedly present situations that appear to confirm that belief. Not because reality is opposing you, but because your awareness is tuned to notice rejection, distance, or inconsistency. You will interpret silence as absence and delay as denial. On the other hand, if you assume you are valued, desired, or supported, the same outer world will feel entirely different. You will notice alignment, subtle affection, and unexpected cooperation. The events may overlap, but the meaning changes completely. This is the key. Experience is not only what happens, but how it is experienced. Assumptions operate quietly in the background of consciousness. They do not need constant attention to remain active. Once established, they become the lens through which everything is filtered. And because human perception is selective, it continuously gathers evidence to reinforce what is already assumed. In this way, assumption becomes self-sustaining. It feeds itself through interpretation. But what is most important to understand is that assumption is not fixed. It is fluid, adaptable, and responsive to conscious choice. You are not trapped in any single assumption unless you continuously reaffirm it. When you begin to intentionally choose a new assumption and persist in it, even when external evidence appears unchanged, you initiate a subtle but powerful shift in experience. At first, the outer world may not seem to respond. Old patterns may still appear, but this is not resistance, it is momentum. Experience takes time to reorganize around a new inner truth. During this phase, persistence becomes essential. Not forcing, not struggling, but calmly maintaining the assumption as already true within. As the new assumption stabilizes, perception begins to change. You start noticing different aspects of people and situations. Your emotional reactions soften or shift. Your expectations adjust. And without any dramatic effort, your experiences begin to align with the new inner state. This is why assumption is so powerful. It is not just belief, it is creative identity in action. What you assume as true does not merely influence your experience, it becomes your experience through sustained awareness. It moves from inner acceptance to outer expression in its own natural timing. And once this is fully understood, you stop treating life as something happening randomly to you. Instead, you begin to recognize that life is responding through you, continuously shaped by the assumptions you inhabit. So the deeper realization is this: nothing in your outer world is independent of your inner assumption. Everything is flowing from it, reflecting it, and eventually revealing it. And when assumption becomes conscious, experience becomes intentional, because in the end, what you assume you will always eventually live. This statement points to a subtle but powerful law of inner experience. What is unstable within cannot fully stabilize without. Creation is not something that happens outside of you in isolation. It is a process that unfolds through your state of consciousness. And within that process, doubt and certainty act like two opposing forces that determine whether something fully forms or dissolves before it matures. Doubt is not simply a thought of uncertainty. It is a divided state of attention. One part of you leans toward possibility, while another part leans toward contradiction. This inner conflict weakens the continuity of your assumption. It breaks the flow of identity that is necessary for anything to fully manifest in experience. When doubt enters, it introduces fragmentation. Instead of being one consistent state, you become two opposing voices within yourself. And creation cannot stabilize in fragmentation. Certainty, on the other hand, is inner wholeness. It is not loud, forceful, or desperate. True certainty is calm. It is the quiet alignment of thought, feeling, and assumption pointing in one direction. When you are certain, there is no internal debate. There is no mental argument against what you already accept as true. This inner unity allows your consciousness to remain steady long enough for experience to form around it. In this sense, certainty is not about external proof. It is about internal completion. When you hold a desire with certainty, you are no longer negotiating with it. You are no longer asking if or when. You are simply being in the state where it is already accepted as real within you. And from that state, your perception, behavior, and emotional responses naturally begin to align with it. Life begins to reflect the consistency you are maintaining inside. But when doubt enters, everything slows. You may still desire something strongly, but the feeling of not having it interrupts the assumption of already being it. This creates a split experience. One moment you feel aligned, the next moment you feel distant. That inconsistency prevents your inner state from settling into form. It is not that doubt destroys creation instantly, it interrupts its continuity. It breaks the thread of sustained consciousness that is required for experience to take shape. Each return to certainty restarts the process, but each return to doubt disrupts it again. This is why progress often feels delayed when inner states fluctuate. Certainty completes creation because it holds the assumption long enough, steadily enough, and peacefully enough for it to become the dominant state of awareness. It allows experience to organize itself without interference. It removes inner resistance, leaving only alignment. And alignment is what creation responds to. It is important to understand that certainty is not forced positivity. It is not pretending or ignoring reality. It is the quiet knowing that what is accepted within you is already unfolding outwardly, even if it has not yet appeared. It is trust in the unseen process of consciousness becoming form. When certainty is present, there is no need to constantly reaffirm or defend your desire. You simply reside in it. And that residence becomes the foundation from which experience arises naturally. So doubt interrupts not because it is powerful, but because it divides attention. And certainty completes not because it pushes reality, but because it unifies awareness. In the end, creation does not respond to struggle, it responds to stability. And when your inner state becomes steady enough to hold one truth without contradiction, that truth must eventually express itself as experience. Because what is held in certainty within consciousness must complete itself without. This is a shift in awareness that changes everything about how you approach desire, time, and experience. Most people live from a state of becoming, constantly reaching forward into a future where what they want is assumed to be missing in the present. But living from the end reverses this entire movement. It asks you to no longer relate to your desire as something ahead of you, but as something already fulfilled within you. When something is already done in consciousness, it means it is already complete in the inner world, the only world from which all experience arises. The outer world is simply the delayed reflection of that inner completion. So the moment you accept something as done within yourself, you are no longer trying to create it. You are simply aligning with what has already been established in awareness. Living from the end means you stop organizing your life around lack and start organizing it around fulfillment. Instead of asking, how do I get it? You begin to embody the state of I already have it. This is not imagination as escape. It is imagination as identity. You are not pretending. You are choosing the version of yourself that already stands at the end of the journey. In this state, your thoughts change naturally. You no longer think from anxiety or uncertainty. You think from completion. Your emotional responses soften because you are no longer negotiating with absence. Your actions become lighter because they are no longer driven by desperation. Everything begins to flow from inner wholeness instead of inner seeking. But living from the end is not always supported by immediate external evidence. In fact, the outer world may initially look unchanged. This is where most people struggle. They mistake delay for denial. But in truth, delay is simply the unfolding of something already decided inwardly. The unseen is not forming, it is revealing. When you truly accept that it is already done, you stop checking reality for permission. You stop looking for signs to validate your state. Instead, you rest in the assumption that what you desire is already real within consciousness, even if it has not yet appeared in form. That inner acceptance is what stabilizes the experience. Living from the end also means shifting your self-concept. You are no longer the version of you who is waiting. You become the version of you who already is, and identity is the foundation of all experience. When identity shifts, perception shifts. When perception shifts, interpretation shifts. And when interpretation shifts, reality eventually follows. This is why persistence matters, not in effort but in state. You return again and again to the feeling of completion. You gently refuse the pull of old assumptions that say not yet or not possible. Instead, you anchor yourself in the quiet, knowing that it is already settled. Over time, this state becomes natural. You no longer have to remind yourself constantly. It becomes the background of your awareness. And from that background, life begins to reorganize itself in ways that match your inner acceptance. So when it has said that it is already done, it is not a metaphor. It is a declaration of inner truth. The only task left is alignment, not chasing, not forcing, not waiting, but living from the end as if it is already your present reality. And when you fully inhabit that state, something remarkable happens. What was once imagined as future stops feeling distant. It begins to feel inevitable, and eventually it simply becomes your experience. Because life does not respond to your desire for the end. It responds to your embodiment of it. And once you live from the end completely, you realize there was never anything to get, only something to accept as already yours. In conclusion, all of these teachings point back to one simple truth. Your inner world is the origin of your outer experience. Whether it is assumption, feeling, belief, certainty, or living from the end, everything begins within consciousness before it ever takes form outside. Nothing in your life is separate from the state you consistently occupy inside yourself. When you understand this, you stop living as a victim of circumstances and start recognizing yourself as the source of experience. You no longer wait for reality to change first. You change your inner position, and reality follows in its own perfect timing. The journey is no longer about chasing or forcing outcomes, but about embodying the state of already having what you desire. Doubt loses its power when certainty becomes your natural state. Resistance dissolves when you stop interpreting it as truth. And separation disappears when you begin living from completion instead of lack. Everything becomes a reflection of the consciousness you are holding in the present moment. So the real work is not effort in the outer world, but alignment in the inner world. Stay faithful to the state you choose. Return to it whenever you drift, and trust the unseen process that is always responding to you. Because in the end, life is not happening to you, it is unfolding from you. And once this is truly realized, everything begins to simplify, soften, and align naturally. Thank you.